I'm going to
I
be
know.
be difficult.
You're fine. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Let's see, let's get this started here. All right, so welcome to helping to create a community in your classrooms. My name is Dr. Richard Chan. I'm in the science department. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about helping to create a community feel to help students feel included, as well as increasing a sense of belonging in the classroom. As we will discuss, it's really important because it helps to improve student success, retention, and of course, just to help to build their own knowledge and foundations when they feel included and belong in the classroom. So a couple things in the meantime. So some of you already in the room have gotten started, but those of you who are just arriving, or if you're watching online, you have two options here. So firstly, again, if you would like, you could scan this little QR code here. That's a little survey to kind of get to know some information about yourselves. And then over here, there's a second QR code for a digital copy of the slides you can download. So you just use your phone to do that. And I checked on the screen over here. It should work through the TV, through the monitor as well, if you're watching virtually. So again, we'll be using this kind of throughout, and you can always download and save this later to look at more detail at home. It's mostly just a lot of memes and pictures and stuff. So our discussion is to look a little bit at creating a culture. So I just wanted to first really quickly, before we get started, get to know a little bit about you all. If you don't mind, just really quickly kind of just giving me, introducing your name, yourself, your pronouns, as well as your preferred name, if you have a different one than what's listed on the rosters, as well as your departments. All right, if you don't mind, Sadia.
Sadia Khan, I teach chemistry, science department. I work closely with Rich, but I don't teach biology.
I'm Lena Musa. She, her, hers. I'm not teaching right now, but I'm the new retention specialist.
Oh, perfect.
So I see a lot of students, so I thought this might be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In School of Business and Technology.
Excellent. Nice to meet you. Lena? Right?
Lena.
Okay, great.
I'm Vince Radel, teach chemistry, he, him, his. And we're just almost 2 years now, right?
I know, almost done.
Yeah.
Almost done with tenure. In the back, do you mind? Yep.
I'm Hilda Fabiani. I teach, I'm in the physical education department, and I teach in continuing education, and I teach college readiness.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. Next.
I'm Cindy Gosson. I'm in the adult education department,
Okay.
ESL instructor for 2 years, and I'm in the APLIS program. So that's
Oh,
why.
okay. Great. Thank you.
So I am Kara Lee.
Can you repeat again? Sorry.
Sorry, I'm Kara Lee.
Kara or
Uh-huh.
Kara Lee?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I am in the adult education
Okay.
department. I teach ESL courses. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm also part of the APLIS program.
Awesome. Nice to meet you.
Hey,
I'm
I'm
Nancy
Nancy
here.
Pocat, and I teach reading language arts for a GED program for adult education.
Okay. Nice to meet you.
I'm Susan McCartney. I go by Susan, except old people, not old people, but old friends might still call me Susie.
Okay.
But I don't use that anymore. So anyway, I teach GED math 6 years now in adult ed, and I go by the pronouns she, her.
Okay, great. So let me make sure I have everybody's name. So Susan, Nancy, Carol Lee, Cindy.
Yep.
Can you remind me your name? I totally forgot that already. Yes.
Hilda.
Hilda. Okay. Vince, Lena, and Sadia. Is that correct? And then Shelly's in the back. All right, great. So again, as we start to get to know each other again, we'll kind of hopefully I'll get to remember everybody's name. So our agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about what is belongingness. So what does that mean in the classroom? Why is it important to create that kind of a community, as well as what does a caring or inclusive classroom look like for students? And more importantly, how do you create one? So a lot of you are already probably doing this, so it's more kind of thinking about finding things and being more intentional about it. That's kind of the big focus on this. So we'll do some sharing and things to kind of talk about what you might be doing. We'll then do some kind of final tips, wrap up, kind of final conclusions. And then if you have any questions, feel free. We'll have some time at the end. But I'm pretty open to questions. So if during the presentation you have anything that you want to ask, feel free to let me know. Just give me a second to finish my thought because I'm super ADD. And so I have to finish my thought, otherwise I'm going to forget. So with that in mind, so let's chat a little bit about belongingness in the classroom and really what that looks like. So a little bit about myself. My name is Richard Chan. My pronouns are he, him, his. So I am a first-generation American, first-generation student from college. I grew up in Virginia, being really the only person of color in my school. So for me, it was very important to kind of think about a lot of those kind of scenarios, primarily because, especially for me, having parents who didn't speak English, English was actually my third language. So, we have to really think about those kind of situations with students, particularly, again, from, English language learners. Neither of my parents went to college, so really a lot of the education was on myself. Other than my parents being like, do your homework, they couldn't help me with anything, so I had to do a lot of it on my own. So really thinking about those kind of scenarios with first-generation students is really important. Academically, I went to Virginia Tech, graduated 2007. My primary degree was in microbiology, and then I got a second degree in sociology. I focus on medical inequality, so really looking at social inequality and access to medicine and healthcare. I minored in chemistry and medical humanities. And then I went to grad school, did a lot of school and things like that. So I love school. I finally just paid off my student loans. I'm so excited. Last month, I got that email. It was great. So I love school and I love teaching, and so I actually ended up leaving medicine to teach full time here, and I'm so much happier, especially since COVID. But I really want to talk a lot about my background because, again, that really impacts a lot of our students. And so for me, growing up, being really the only person of color throughout most of my education, that's something that really impacts. So I did not see any professor or teacher really that looked anything like me until almost my junior, senior year of college. So it's really important to kind of think about students who come in with those kind of backgrounds where it is hard to connect. And so we want to think about making, it available and open to students, even if you may not look the same, as much as helping them feel welcome. Makes sense? So with that in mind, a couple things. So go back to your clickers. Hopefully this will change. You log back in. So I have a couple questions. So firstly, just a quick kind of gauge rubric. So I feel like my class is inclusive and a safe environment for my students.
I don't know how to look.
Oh, it logged you out?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's thrown me out twice.
It might help if you come up here and you do the screen there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, usually my students have the app, so it's automatically saved.
Oh, I think that was seven.
So yeah, keep it open in a browser because it'll change each question. All right. Sorry. Normally students would have access to this all semester. You won't have to keep doing this.
Sometimes students are ahead of us, believe me.
There's some responses coming in.
Oh.
Sorry. Just changing my screen a little bit. I'm testing you all already.
Yeah, I feel like I'm failing. It's not good.
Me too. No, I can't do it.
Mine, this one won't go out.
Let me change.
Okay, I don't feel that bad.
Oh, there's a group of us. Well, I don't know what's
I have a
going
couple
on.
people answering already. Not a big deal. All right, so let's take a quick look though, real quick here. So when we're looking at just kind of a quick gauge, so it looks like a lot of you already have an idea of creating some kind of a nice environment for your students that's pretty welcoming, which is great. So hopefully the goal here is to kind of give you some more tools to add to your toolbox. All right, but again, hopefully we'll get everybody to the strongly agree side by the end. Next question. Have you ever felt uncomfortable discussing your race, nationality, gender identity, or disability with anybody in class or your coworkers? So it looks like most of you are pretty comfortable about kind of talking about yourselves, but some of you do have a little bit of, hesitancy, which I understand, right? Again, it's not always easy to, disclose all of this information, especially some of it that may not be as totally obvious, right? So race is super easy to kind of sometimes tell. Sometimes age is also a little bit easier to figure out, but then there's a lot of things below the surface that may not always be obvious. So when we start looking at these things, again, we want to consider. Next one, I have personally been in classrooms as a student where nobody has looked like me. Okay, so very interesting. So we have a nice mixed bag of results, which is pretty interesting, right? So some of you do feel like, again, you have kind of been pretty, usually anyway, if that happens, if somebody looks a lot like you in your same classroom, you're probably going to feel a little bit more connected and more involved. Whereas if you're not as, similar to others, there's a little bit more difficulty there. So again, things to consider and look at. All right. All right, so this next one really quickly, how did you feel if you didn't feel like you belong? So how did that feel to you when you weren't included? Just maybe we'll do a quick 1 or 2 word answer. And if you want, in the meantime, you can always download Poll Everywhere, the app, and then you can just log in and it'll sync you directly to my account. So I'll put the code here if you want to do that. Can I erase this?
Yes.
Okay. So while some of you are answering that, it's called Poll Everywhere. And then the user is all right, great. It's not touchable. Okay, so, all right, so interesting, awkward, uncomfortable, self-conscious, embarrassed, right? These are things that students might be feeling in your class already. And again, this is especially with students who may not necessarily be, coming from families with college backgrounds or families with students who may look different from their classmates, right? So again, we have a lot of these things that may happen that may be below the surface that you might not know about. So it's mostly, again, bringing awareness to it, all right? All right, we'll skip this one, but not important. So let's talk a little bit about belongingness. All right, so most of us at least have some kind of idea what belongingness is. Would anybody like to give us just a quick description of what you think belongingness is?
Feeling like you have something in common with those around you.
Okay, feeling like you have something common with others.
Right, and you're accepted.
Oh, good. Acceptance.
Yeah.
Anything else anybody wants to add? I feel like that's a pretty good start, right? So when we start thinking about this, so one of the earlier kind of thinking about this idea, this concept of belongingness in academics anyway, was from Haggerty in '92. So they kind of described it as experience of personal involvement in a system or environment so that persons feel themselves to be an integral part of the system or environment. So again, feeling included, right? Feeling like they're part of something larger. So more recently, and fun fact, I think some of you may have been here. We actually had a guest speaker at our workshop a few years ago, Professor Strayhorn. So he also did some research on this as well. And his definition is that students with perceived social support on campus, a feeling or sensation of connectedness, and the experience of mattering and feeling cared about, accepted, respected, valued by, and important to the campus community or others on campus, such as faculty, staff, and peers. So a little bit more discrete, more detailed description, but still very important to kind of think about all the elements, because it's not just the classroom, right? It's the campus, it's the environment, it's really the experience as well. So college in itself is its own micro system, micro ecosystem, and so we have to really help students kind of figure that out. So when we're thinking about belongingness, we have to also keep in mind it's not the same thing as retention, not the same thing as success, right? They are similar, they're very closely tied together, but they are very different, all right? So when we're talking about belongingness and retention, retention again is thinking about enrollment into the next semester. Are they able to complete? Are they get to graduation? Those kinds of things, completion of courses. So again, when we're looking at this, it's mostly looking at it as kind of related again to persistence, but still a little bit different than that, all right? Now, the problem with retention is that when we start to look at it, we see it as a deficit on the student's part. So if they are not retaining, if they're not staying to the, completing the course or anything, then we also often look at it from the perspective of a failure. Does that make sense? And that's a problem because again, that implies other things. So it doesn't really include other factors that might be involved. Another factor, of course, is success. So when we look at success, this will vary by individual. So students' success, a student's idea of success is very different than ours, right? So for me, I like to think of my students getting A's in the class. That'd be great. But for some students, it's just a pass, right? So it will vary by student, by faculty member, it's going to vary as well, and even by administration. So we see very different descriptions of this. And we find, especially with students from marginalized communities, that success for them tends to be just graduating without thinking about the belongingness. So they'll get through everything, but they may not feel like they belonged. So again, we're leaving out that element. Makes sense? So they can succeed, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're learning a lot or they're getting a great experience out of it. But they got their graduation, they degree and everything. So again, we want to think about other things beyond that. So when we get to belongingness, it's much more student-focused, asset-focused. What are they bringing to the table? And then more importantly, it talks about a lot of their own shared self experiences. Because again, everybody has their own background, their own experiences that they're bringing to the table. So we want to include that as much as possible. All right. So why does it matter? So when we're looking at this, one of the biggest problems we're seeing, especially post-COVID, is a lot of students in higher ed and below even are feeling high feelings of loneliness. So we're really seeing a lot of isolation, particularly again with students who are just, screen, as well as they're just not socializing as much. And so this is really important because when they're feeling more lonely and not included, that's going to have a lot of negative outcomes, regardless of whatever metric we're looking at. And in addition to that, we're also looking at the sense of belonging, more importantly, being highly associated with things like being well adjusted to the college community, which then makes them feel more involved and then likelier to succeed in courses, graduate, and more importantly, also continue on to their careers. And this is even more important during their first year, first semester in college. So with that in mind, again, a lot of our students may be at different levels, but a lot of these techniques can then be employed throughout different levels of learning. So other things to think about is that the process of thinking of belongingness is something that changes. So it may vary by class, it may vary by time of day in some cases, it may even vary by semester to semester. So it's not something that's constant. So again, we have to keep in mind that there are going to be days where students feel less less included in the class. Other days they will feel really included. But we're really thinking about bigger picture, right, on the regular basis, as well as then thinking about how can we intervene and help to make it a more consistent kind of a feeling. So ultimately, like we mentioned, students from marginalized groups, traditionally marginalized groups, whether it be racial or ethnic, gender, orientation, ableness, socioeconomic status, first generation students, right? These students are much more likely, and based off of all of the articles I was reading about this, all of them have the same outcomes, finding that they're just that lack of belongingness really made a huge impact on their success in the course and their continuation in the courses and graduation rates. So that's something we really have to think about, because that is one of the biggest indicators of success, not even just looking at all the other support that's given, but just something as simple as feeling included and belonging. Yes?
What was the age groups that you looked at?
So I focused mostly on higher ed, so kind of the 20s, teens to 20s. Yeah.
And were they, I call them day students or adult students?
It was a mix. So some of them were community colleges, some were four-year students, four-year schools. So there was a pretty wide range of data that was coming in. So I was kind of looking at the generalized data rather than individual focused. But there is going to be some differences here and there, but we're kind of looking at the bigger picture, and it all kind of comes out in the math somehow. All right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that that I really kept seeing a lot that popped up was the idea that there's a minority stress model, where being a person in one of the minority groups, marginalized groups, there is a very close relationship with stress. And so that stress can have a huge, profound impact on learning, as well as, of course, belongingness. And so especially students from these groups in a classroom are much more likely to be very anxious and stressed out just being there. They're going to have a lot of anxiety about being stereotyped right off the bat. And also, they're going to feel less included. So they're going to feel isolated, and they may even feel complete rejection. And so this is really where we need to come in and help them feel more involved and included, whether it's, even just something minor like just checking in with them here and there, or, getting them involved with other classmates, right, doing collaborations and stuff. But the big thing is making sure that we are creating this environment where students don't feel like they aren't included, all right? And there is a even more relationship, not only with just, let's say racial minorities, but even sexual and gender minorities. So there was an article I was reading about students who are non-binary and trans students, and those students had even more discrimination against them, particularly where they were rejected by instructors. There were instructors who refused to use their pronouns correctly or use their correct names that they preferred. And so that in itself creates that barrier to success in students. So even something as minor and simple as just using their correct terms, right, their own names and pronouns, what they themselves see them as, is a barrier. And so we have to really consider that as well. And again, it's something that may be, direct or indirectly, received by the students. But at the end of the day, we have to be aware of those differences. Do you have a question, Lena? Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you brought that up, I met a student who said he goes by all pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to offend him.
Sure.
So I can use she or he
Yes.
or they.
Mhm.
His name is Austin, and I wasn't
Sure.
sure. Because I never came across that,
Mhm.
that they can choose all pronouns.
Sure. So it's really kind of a personal thing. So everybody will have their own personal choice. So it also varies by individual. So for me, I generally use he, him, and I have a partner who uses he, him, sometimes they, them. So it really is just by the person. And so as long as you're acknowledging and respecting that, that's all that matters. So at the end of the day, it's really just treating them with respect and honoring what they tell you at the end of the day. All right. And don't feel like you have to get it right every time, because it's a learning process, right? So at the end of the day, as long as you're trying and actively trying, they'll see that, and that will make them feel included regardless. So just try. That's the big thing. So looking at belongingness in the school kind of environment, so things that really affect it at the academic level, of course, is the faculty side. That's a huge element, especially faculty empathy. So having the ability to really connect and understand where they're coming from. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Building on that, of course, is that feeling and sense of community in itself, of course, is going to be very important as well if they feel included. Engagement, the more involved they are on campus, in the classroom, in groups, etc. That will also be very important as well, so that they feel like they belong. Their connection with their peers is absolutely essential as well. The more classmates they're interacting with on a regular basis, the more likely they're going to feel involved and included in the classroom. Even if there's just one other person in the class that they get along with really well, that can make a huge difference. And then, of course, creating that relationship that we have with students as well on the faculty side. So again, we really have to think about what we want as teachers, as educators, because at the end of the day, we're here to get students to learn and love the learning, right? So the more we work on all of this, the more they feel included, the more they feel like they're actually going to get something out of it. So taking a look at the little video clip I found here. So this is really, I'm just going to show you just a couple minutes of it, but it's really important to understand that, again, belongingness to everybody is going to be individual. Everybody has their own sense of belonging. So just a little clip here.
What makes me feel like I belong doesn't necessarily make you or you feel like you belong. Belonging is different for each and every one of us. So some things that make me feel like I belong, one of those things is I can walk into work one day sporting my braids, and I can walk in the next day with my natural hair, and people not look at me like I'm an alien, because that's actually happened before. Or people gloss over me because they're afraid to say something because I've changed my appearance a little bit, right? But when I can come in and do that, that makes me feel like I belong. Or when I go into an executive meeting and I roll up my sleeves because it's a hot day and I want to show off my tattoo. I want to be judged for my tattoo because my tattoo is special to me. It means something really important to me. And I don't want to hide that part of me. Another thing that could make me feel like I belong is if I walk into work after a traumatic event has happened within my community and one of my workmates leans in and says, "Hey, how are you today?" That makes me feel like I belong. Now, those might not be the things that make you feel like you belong, but one of the important things that I also found was that belonging is a two-way street. And what I mean by that is we have to understand our own sense of belonging. Belonging isn't something that we can sit back and have something done to us. We must participate, and in order to do that, you must know who you are as an individual in order to feel, in order for you to be able to articulate what makes you have a sense of belonging. Those conditions, those 5 conditions that I talked about, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, those must be.
Right, we'll stop there. But a really important thing to consider, again, it's not just how you feel like you belong, but then also thinking about how others belong as well. So again, that's going to look a little bit different for everybody, but at the end of the day, it's all about trying to acknowledge some of those things. Okay, so that kind of conscious acknowledgement. So taking a look at what might influence belongingness, we kind of looked at that picture earlier, but ultimately for most folks, it's being seen and heard and respected. So more importantly, in the classroom, feeling like you're cared about. So all it really takes is just a little bit of empathy and respect and caring. So when you're looking at this kind of scenario, like she mentioned, if there is something that happens in somebody's community, right, it's important to sometimes reach out and check in on folks. So I have a lot of students currently who are Palestinian and Jewish, and they're dealing with a lot of stuff right now. And so with that in mind, you have to acknowledge that, right? They're dealing with a lot of things in their personal lives, in their families, and so we have to really make sure that we save room for them. And honestly, I like to give them a little bit extra, a little bit of leeway with some stuff because they are dealing with things that we don't deal with here, right? So feeling that respect and caring, creating that relationship is super important as well. As educators, we create those foundations with our students each day, hopefully by the end of the semester and beyond. And so the more connected they are, the more likely they are to really get a good experience out of your class. I have a lot of students who still update me on things constantly. I get lots of updates all the time. And that's really great because then it knows that they care enough, right? So things to consider is also cultural capital, things to kind of start employing into your own classes is skills and things that they may have learned from their own homes that they're bringing to the classroom. So especially with like adult ed, they probably have a lot of extra experiences outside of the classroom that they can bring in as examples or case studies or whatever else you want to kind of work into, like questions. So I like to bring in a lot of things like particularly from science, like bring in like scientists from other groups. So a lot of underrepresented groups in science. So bring in a lot of women in science, people of color in science, sexual minorities in science. All those things are really important to bring up so that the students can feel like there's somebody in that field that they can connect to. This is especially important to science. So I was reading this article on STEM classes, and that is one of the biggest indicators, particularly in women and in science, is finding a person that they can see as a scientist who looks like them. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That makes the biggest connection and the feeling of, oh yeah, I belong here. This is something I can do. And so there's social belongingness and academic belongingness as well that may factor in as well. So in the classroom, there's a small group, but then also when you're looking at the larger scale of their academic journey, that in itself, they need to feel belonged as well. So one of the other big things I really try to press on my students is self-confidence, because a lot of these students come in with a lot of baggage. I'm not good at science. I'm not good at math. I'm terrible at tests, right? Those are things that they're constantly thinking. A lot of them tell you right off the bat. And those are things you have to consider. Again, it's not the only thing, right? And you have to really build that confidence. And that's part of the, the things that they have to work on to feel belong or included. Campus climate, of course, is important. And then really the biggest thing is perception. That makes a big difference, all right? So how they're seeing things. So again, when we're looking at inclusion, right, we have a lot of key terms. A lot of them are very similar but different. So I found it's a little bit more fun way of looking at it. So when we're looking at equality, right, equality is having everybody get the same book, all right? Wow, that is important, right? Everybody has access to the same stuff. It doesn't mean they're going to get the same things out of it. So equality is important, but we also have to think about diversity because we also have to think about everybody else's backgrounds, right? There's a lot of other things out there that others might feel more connected to. So having that option, that diversity of thought. Equity is another one that is another close one, but equity is making sure that everybody is getting to that same point. So when we're thinking about, division of resources and everything, right? Everybody's getting what's best for them. So that doesn't mean you're doing the same thing for everybody, but everybody's getting the same at the end of the day. Makes sense? They're getting the same outcome. Acceptance, again, is learning that others are different, and then more so acknowledging that and knowing that it's okay, right? And then belonging, as we said, is reading any book that you want without feeling judged, which is another very important one because students come in with that feeling, especially at the beginning of the semester when they don't know what to expect. So that's really important as well. And then finally, justice, of course, is making sure everybody gets the right book. textbooks. Make sense? So just some buzzwords to kind of think about because they are very similar, but they do have distinctive differences. So what does an inclusive classroom look like? One size fits all is interesting and great to think about because it's great for prep. But when we're thinking about our students, they're going to have their own individual needs. So one size fits all doesn't necessarily work well, especially in a college community where there's so many different thoughts, so many different ways of learning. So we really have to think about what's kind of the best process to get a lot of inclusion to your students. So when we're thinking about this, one of the big things I think about is a trauma-informed classroom. You may have heard of that. Just acknowledging that people come in with stuff, right? So much baggage, so many experiences, possibly trauma, and that is going to impact their learning. So when we're thinking about everything, we want to use intentional things. Again, things you're probably already doing, but doing them with intent. So a lot of the things I came up with and I saw were HIPS. Again, Tuan can talk all about those later. We'll talk about a couple, but HIPS is one of the big things, high impact practices, very helpful to help students, especially in large groups. We also have to understand, again, the differences and help to create collaboration and ways for the students to chat and really create those communications. The other big thing is thinking about empathy and respect. Empathy is one of the big ones as well. Students want to feel like you care and you understand where they're coming from. So really important to kind of think about those things. And particularly, again, in the sciences and math, right, doing is very important and being is very important. Recognizing that I can do this. This is something that somebody who looks like me can also do. So our students, very diverse. Again, we don't need to go through all of these things, but we do have students coming in with lots of backgrounds that are making them unique. And so you're going to have a little bit of everything here. And so when we think about students of colors, women in your classes, right? Again, when we're starting to think about international students or students who are, I actually have a lot of students who are undocumented as well. Though, you know, if they feel comfortable enough with you, they will tell you. Right? And so when you think about that relationship, again, if you can build that trust, then they will give you a lot more information about themselves. Another one is different abled. There's a lot of students who may have different ablenesses. So that's also why I like to do subtitles, because I have a lot of students who may have hearing impairness. I also have a lot of students who are from the LGBTQ community. So I always make it very well known as well, you know, about myself, because for me, I didn't have any queer teachers when I was growing up. So I have so many students every semester, usually at least multiple every semester, who will, you know, really reach out to me and realize, oh my gosh, like this is something I can do, right? Science is something that's awesome. Of course, we have to think about neurodiverse students as well. So as me being ADHD also really fits into that category. First generation students and students experiencing trauma. Personally, for me, I dealt with a school shooting my senior year of college. So for me, being in a classroom was really hard for the first couple weeks. Throughout med school, I actually skipped most of my classes because I couldn't be in the classroom physically, psychologically. And so when you think about those situations, right, it really can impact the learning. So for me, I actually changed things around. I created videos for my students. So if they don't want to be in the classroom, everything is recorded and they can watch it at home. They just come in for the labs. But they have opportunities to learn the information in other ways, right? So it's all about thinking about your own experiences and how you can use that to help, you know, create more opportunities for others. Not super important. I do include these in my class, but again, mostly just to check in on students. So how are they doing? Are they learning the material, etc.? We can skip this. I also have this for students as well, just as an example. So students who don't like to raise their hands in class and ask questions, I give them opportunity to type their questions in, so it's anonymous. So again, just options for students for, you know, learning in their own ways. All right, so let's take a quick look at your survey results for really quickly. So again, a lot of you are really excited, some of you are just tired. I get it, it's afternoon. There's some tears, I get it too. But hopefully we're almost done, so no worries. But again, just to kind of gauge, this is something I give my students on day one in class, because this gauges what's going on so I can see how they're doing, and then any of their, feelings or thoughts. So again, gets me an idea. I usually ask them what is their career goals or their majors. That can be something you can do. So lots of you in different departments here. We also have a lot of part-time, some full-time, some admin, right? So again, different things. Students have families. I have a lot of students with kids, so that's something to consider as well, right? They have other folks that they're responsible for. Other classes. So here again, I put how long you've been at Triton, but looking about other classes. So lots of students are taking full courses, so you have to consider that as well.
This poll everywhere is anonymous to the student, but not to
Right.
you.
No, I don't make them
You
sign
see
in.
their name, yes.
I don't ask them to sign in.
No,
I don't require it.
but isn't it, I wanna ask, like, when you check, like, if they don't understand something, do you do it during the class? Or the
Yeah, so I'll see it at the end, and then I can just answer the question anonymously.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the students can sign in as guests, and so they don't have to register.
Oh,
So first generations, again, I have a lot of students who are first generation. Awesome. Nobody's signed up their books yet. Just little questions I like to check in with students, and then thinking about their values and stuff. So not really important, but these are just things I kind of include on the first day of class, all right, just to get an idea of things. So how do we make students feel like they matter? So most of you are already doing stuff. So let's, kind of think a little bit about what are things that you're doing. So for me specifically, the most important thing is the first few weeks, right? And so one of the things that we can really think about are how do we create an inviting classroom? How do you get to know the students? And how do you get to know each other? So first day is always super exciting, right? So what is something that some of you might do to help to get to know your students? Yes.
I have to tell them about my background because I am, like when I'm looking at the minority list or the diversity list, I'm three of those people.
Yeah,
on there.
exactly.
And so when the lady was talking, one thing about ESL students, they always talk about my hair.
Yeah.
Because my hair changes every week.
They're
like, teacher, you get your hair done every week?
Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, no. But I do kind of tell them from my cultural background because I do kind of get sad sometimes because I can't tell them about my background and ancestors. And so it gets kind of like a sensitive topic.
Absolutely.
Because I can't tell you past slavery. And they always ask that question because I am teaching students who are coming as migrants. And so we kind of have that conversation. And then I had one student last week who asked more questions about these things. And I'm like, oh, gotta do a little bit more research on myself. And so every semester I just dig deeper into myself to kind of give them some more information about me. And so every semester I've learned to like give them some more details about myself and my family so that they can give me more details and feel comfortable about doing these stuff.
Exactly, and it's a learning process, right? Because every semester you learn more about what you need to belong, and then you also learn what students need to belong, right? And so it's kind of a teaching for both of you, right? Both sides. Anything else somebody else might do real quick for getting to know your students? Yes.
I pass out index cards. They introduce each other, but then I pass out index cards and give them questions, to answer. And what do you like to do? The pronouns I've added, things like that, because they'll feel more comfortable, writing it rather than saying it out loud.
Exactly.
It's like a discussion board where like they can have information about themselves. Introduce themselves, their favorite, either the nickname, pronouns, how do they want to be addressed in the rest of the class, and other students can read it, so they know it is available like to the rest of the class too. So that way, like the other students can look up those, and it also gives me background about them, so that it's kind of there, so they can answer each other's questions. They can see which if they are in as the same cohort, they can see classes. same interest or same high schools.
Exactly.
Say, are they transferring to say have similar interests, transferring to like same colleges, looking for things. So it kind of like helps building them, and I keep that open for the rest of the semester.
That's a great idea. So with that in mind, right, so things that we can think about, again, first generation students especially are really difficult. They have difficult time adjusting because it's a totally new environment. And for me especially, I didn't have parents who went to college, so I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know what I had to do. So that's really where we can really intervene and help students understand where the resources are, what they can do if they, need help with homework or whatever, right? They really need that extra little bit of stuff. So some things that I do specifically, I actually, this one, this is more fun. So like I said, I have really bad ADHD. So, so when we think about learning names, it's a different story. So this one, I just made a little story here the other day. So if you know the song, it's a little bit more fun, but it's.
Trumpet. A little bit of Monica in my life, a little bit of Erica on my side, a little bit of Rita.
Right. So again, names is one of the most important things, learning names of students. So how you do that is up to you. How I do it, I actually have station numbers that I have mentally in my head. So I can create my own little seat map. And as students adjust to where they are, then I start to learn their names that way. And then I learn all their names very quickly. I tell them, give me 2 weeks. All right, I will get your names in 2 weeks, I promise. But again, just actively try. And more importantly, I always ask, tell me how to pronounce it correctly. Correct me if it's wrong. All right, because again, it's super important. So what do? I do profiles. So similar to the cards, I do it digitally, so they just fill it out. They have a little sheet. I'll show you the link in a little bit. But they kind of talk about their career goals, what they need to learn, what are things that did not work for them in the past. I also like to ask them fun stuff. Do you like Marvel? Do you like DC? What's your favorite Pokemon? Because that's one of my favorite things. So things that help to connect them to me as well, a lot of them will reach out. What are your favorite shows? What are your favorite movies? Things like that. You're just gonna find some connection, hopefully. And I also do a discussion board as well. I call it New Class Who Dis. So students are required to either post a quick video clip or a picture and then describe a little bit about themselves. I also have a pre-assessment, just a quick quiz, 20 questions. What do you know coming into the class? They take the same quiz at the end. Hopefully they learned a lot and it's a lot easier. And then I help them to create study groups, especially in labs. That way they have contacts and stuff, right? Especially, again, trading numbers, really helpful, or social media nowadays, whatever, but they get to know each other. So I put one of my former students, I love their intro Who Dis. So this is how the assignment works. It's in Blackboard. So just basically by the end of the first week, they post the video, and then they go and they comment on their classmates. I ask them to comment at least 10, and then talk about connections. Oh, I'm in the same class. Oh, I also am the same major. I love this TV show, whatever. I give them a lot of freedom. I give them a lot of leading questions. They only have to answer a couple of them. And then here's the profile. Again, this will be in the slides, but the profile, I give you a link you can look at later. All right. So here's the student's video that I really like. It's a fun one. So they introduce themselves in a more creative way, which I loved.
Hey, do you have some time to answer some quick questions?
Yeah, of course. Come on.
What's your name and your pronouns?
My name is Jade. I go by Rhythm.
Why are you taking microbiome?
I really love biology. I always have.
What are some of your previous educational or professional experiences?
I haven't had any yet, but I'm really excited to make one.
What are you excited or nervous about with this course?
I'm really excited to start using the microscope again. I haven't used one in so long.
Are you taking any other courses at Triton?
I'm taking 3 other courses.
What are some of your hobbies and interests, or just things you like to do for fun?
I love doing makeup, and I love doing my hair.
What are some of your favorite movies, TV shows, video games?
I've been watching Wednesday recently, and I play Hades game on the Switch.
What do you love learning about?
I love learning strange little facts. Like, did you know that most of the bones in the human body are in the hands and feet? So you break them, you break half your bones.
What are some awesome things about yourself?
This isn't my real hair. I'm not a real blonde.
Do you have any pets?
I have 2 pets, Haku and Vodka.
What's one thing you'd like your instructor or classmates to know about you?
I really love 100 Questions of Code.
Show us your favorite meme or GIF.
This one.
All right, so students will take, some students anyway, will go all the way, and it's great. That's the best part. So again, just, give them the tools and then they'll do it, all right? Some of them will, anyway. So, building relationships, again, helpful things are, especially if they're new, getting them to learn how to learn. So I spent a lot of time incorporating things on study techniques, note-taking, those kind of things as well, especially with my notes. They're partially filled out, so students have to fill out and be there in class. I also do a lot of metacognition and reflecting on their learning, so they have a lot of assignments on that as well. Being a role model is super important. So like I said, I am more likely, I'm very comfortable with, divulging my own identities and my background for students. And so students in certain groups, especially things where they can't be visually seen, like mental illness. So I talk about my ADHD all the time, my anxiety all the time. I talk about my meds that I'm on with my students sometimes. And so I also talk about my partner all the time too. So things that make them feel included, that they can connect to you about, is going to help them a lot. Again, even if it's not necessarily something that you're in the same group with, you can find connections somehow, all right? So as long as you feel comfortable with it, again, you don't have to do these things, right? So just divulge how you feel, what you're willing to do, okay? So other things to think about, again, is considering learning about other groups. So one thing I really think is important is thinking about the idea of color blindness. That's another important thing to really think about, because we still have to acknowledge the fact that there are differences, and that's important, right? We have to learn and understand the differences rather than say, oh yeah, like I don't care about differences, right? It's more understanding that there are differences. So again, you can take a closer look at this later at home, but I want to kind of get to the ends here. So teaching, very important as well. So how you teach, how you involve your students is also going to be very important. I have a very sarcastic personality, so I incorporate that all the time. I use a lot of memes and GIFs and different clips and stuff all the time, just to kind of keep students interested, and again, just to make it more fun. So how you personalize it is going to be up to you, all right? I have a whole folder on my computer of just like memes and stuff. I have tons of science memes, so you can find whatever ones for your disciplines, but I literally have like hundreds of nerdy science memes that I use in class all the time. Thinking about your students' learning, there's lots of different styles, so try to use different ranges, different styles to kind of incorporate, again, their learning techniques. So just a little clip there. Show, not tell. That's the big thing. So again, don't say, oh yeah, I'm going to be very inclusive or whatever. Show them, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. That's what they're going to actually learn from. So the more you do not tell them, that's going to be more important. Make sense? For timing, unfortunately, again, there's a lot of stuff that happens. So I was going to do some scenarios, but I had a student who was dealing with a lot of stuff. So this was an example of something they sent me. So they had a close friend who took their lives. And so they texted me. I give them my number. I give them a Google number, so don't give them your real number. I give them a Google number. But they texted me, and so how would you respond to this?
So I would respond with, that I understand and I'm terribly sorry, for your loss. And, if there's anything I can do for you or point you in the direction at school, where you can, meet the wellness center.
Excellent.
If you feel like you need someone.
There we go, right? Empathy and showing them to resources. So very similar to what I did. Basically, here's my response. It was a lot longer. But basically, right, I talked to them and I was like, the class is not the priority right now, take care of yourself. And I also directed them to the counselors on campus, because they are trained and it's a free resource. I send them all of the time. I send lots of my students to the counselors. And again, it's all about empathy and showing that you care and that you're willing to help them catch back up with stuff. That's the important thing at the end of the day. All All right. So how you word it is up to you, but again, you want to show them. All right. So that little difference makes a big one. I actually had a student who actually came in crying yesterday because her mom's in the hospital right now. So I actually had to deal with that similar situation like this as well. So again, it's very hard, but again, just be empathetic. Okay. Mental health is a huge issue as well. All of our students are dealing with a lot of mental health. So just tread lightly and be understanding, right? Some students have depression, really bad anxiety, and it's not that we aren't going to, necessarily let them get away with things, but it's more understanding that we can work around that, find ways to help support them in those scenarios, again, get them to the right resources potentially. While we're not trained in mental health counseling, we can give them support verbally, empathetically, and get them to the right resources. Okay. Neurodiversity, again, is very important. So for me, mini lectures was super important. So for students with ADHD, who have attention problems, autism, spectrum disorders, it's all about small snippets. So micro lectures are helpful, 15, 20-minute little clips are great. Other resources, I give my students a lot of podcasts that I listen to all the time, little links to those, or social media, TikToks. I have a lot of TikToks as well in my videos. Activities, hands-on stuff is really helpful too. So anything that gets them moving and active usually helps a lot. Persistence is what is most important. So keeping them on track and keeping them confident. So with that in mind, another one to think about. Sorry, I have a lot of motion here. So we'll kind of skip through this at the end, but the big thing is imposter syndrome is huge in our students. I have noticed a lot of my students have imposter syndrome. So again, it's all about building their confidence so that they know that they can do it. I know, I'm sorry, I'm like making sure I don't run over. So I think that was the last bit here. Online classes, the last thing is for online. Does anybody teach online? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, Tuan, I will send you this later. But if you want, I do have some tips here for online learning as well. It's similar, but again, it's much more hands-on. All right. So this link is here. Here it is. So here's a little table that's again in your slides you can look at later. And then the other thing is just be accessible. All right. Be available to the students so that they can find you. So fun things you can do, especially if it's online, right? Have them go to really cool things in your field that might be interesting, or a opportunity for something that they can visit online. Virtually is great. Internships and mentorships is great too if that's something in your field that's possible. Yeah, we don't have time for this, not important. But final take home, again, just be intentional, empathetic, and again, think about, for me, I always think about what did I need when I was a student, and then I try to use that as a way to help my students, because you have to go back to think about when you were in their shoes and trying to learn the material, right? It's the different situation than when you've been teaching it for several years. So you have to kind of go back and think about where's the holes in the knowledge, and what are the things that we can do to make them more involved and included. Okay. So last questions here is just, are there any questions before we close out?
I wish you would come back and go through all of this.
Yeah.
Do several workshops.
I'll do part 2 later. But all of the slides are available, so you can watch all of those at home, look through them. Oh, before I leave too, I forgot, I made you all handouts. So, oh, she left before I gave her one. So I gave you a little handout. You don't have to do this here. I was gonna have hands-on stuff, but timing didn't work. So I created a little handout of some common little things you can do. I set it up low, medium, and high prep. And then if you need more, I have a QR code on the bottom for, oh, perfect, yes, great. So there's a QR code for all of the links and sources here. It's a great one with lots of other suggestions. And then on the back are some thinking questions to help kind of guide your preparations for probably summer or fall, to think about what you might do to help to create more inclusive environments. And then at the very bottom, again, I have QR codes for the slides and this handout, digital copy as well, so you can use those later when needed.
And where was the QR code for the online, if you're teaching online?
That
In the
was,
slide?
it's in the slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so all of that should be available there. All right. Any other questions? I know, sorry, I wanted to get you all out on time, so.
Can you tell that to Nicole?
I don't know. Yes.
Where can you find trauma, inclusive trauma informed syllabus policy?
I will have to look. I'll get back to you. I know where you are. But there are a lot of resources online. You can probably kind of do a quick search.
No, I was just wondering.
Yeah, but a lot of the policy, a lot of the stuff here already is kind of inclusive in that already. So it's just, you know, adding the extra layer of empathy and thinking about, you know, some of the students might be going through some really rough stuff. I have a lot of students who are unhoused. I have a lot of students who are going through domestic violence. I had a lot of students who are going through a lot of other, you know, family illness and personal illness. So again, those are things that, you know, are happening and we have to just, you know, be aware of.
Yeah, like I just was wondering, like, you know, if there are any policies.
Not specifically. So for my syllabus, something I do, I give my students mental health days. So I give them 2 mental health days each semester that they just email or send me a text, hey, I'm taking my mental health day, and then I give them a excused absence for the day. So no questions asked. That way they know they don't have to be there every day, but if they need it, they can take it. Most of them won't, but a handful of them will. Use them both. But most of the time, again, just knowing that that policy is there helps them to feel like there is something in case something goes wrong. So just thinking about little, you know, syllabi policies, class policies. Like I said, I do videos for my students. That's a huge commitment. So don't expect to have to do that. But think about other things that you can do for students who might be missing the work that may be able to get, you know, material in other ways. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, my contact info is on the handout as well. You can always shoot me an email, stop by the science office, either way. Okay. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy this beautiful weather before it gets